Hello and welcome, everyone. We're absolutely thrilled to have you joining us from across the globe. Thank you for being here. Hopefully, you're all settled in, extra points if you're cozy with a cup of tea, and excited to join us on a virtual adventure discovering some of our exciting new trips for 2026. I'm Harriet, the interim head of sales here at Explore, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so as we travel across the globe to some incredible places. So, what's coming up and what's in store? We've got an exciting hour ahead. We'll begin with a light speed introduction to who we are and what makes exploring with us so unforgettable, followed by a quick info on our Explore Foundation. Then we'll be joined by three fantastic colleagues who will guide you through their virtual journey through a whopping 5 new trips. We'll wrap things up with a live Q&A session, an exclusive special offer, and prize draws you won't want to miss. Before we leap in, here are a few tips just to keep everything running smoothly. Everyone's automatically on mute. We'd love to hear from you and to get you involved by using the chat and the Q&A features. In the chat, let us know which place is on the top of your must-see list. If you've traveled with Explore before, or if you're trying any of the destinations that we're talking about, we'd love to hear from you. If you've got a question, pop them in the Q&A section. We've got a team of experts ready to answer as we go, and we'll save some great ones for the end live session too. Need to step away or miss something? Don't worry. We're recording today's event, and you'll get an email later this week with a link to the recording and a handy FAQ summary with all the details and that special offer. Before we head out, a quick intro for those who might be new to Explore. Some of you may already know us well, but for anyone that's just discovering us, welcome. At Explore, we offer 350 small group adventures across more than 100 incredible countries. From classic discovery tours and walking holidays to wildlife safaris, rainforest treks, and unforgettable family expeditions. Our trips are designed for curious travelers seeking meaningful, immersive experiences in the world. Our groups are small, around 11 on average, led by expert local guides and filled with those wow moments that stay with you long after you've returned home. We're also excited to introduce our newest collection, Explore Upgraded. It's everything you already love about Explore Adventure, but with an extra touch of comfort. Think upgraded stays, added ease, and a little indulgence after a long day of exploration. So, what makes people fall in love with traveling with Explore? It's all about how we do things a little differently. On our trips, you won't just tick off those big name sites. You'll also uncover hidden gems that most travelers never even hear about. We believe in truly experiencing the destination, not just observing it. This means meaningful moments, real connections, and spontaneous detours that can't be planned or replicated. Our incredible tour leaders are at the heart of what we do. With deep local knowledge and strong community ties, they unlock experiences you'd never find in a guidebook. Whether it's watching a sunset from a small boat in Greece, having dinner with a local family, or joining in on our local celebrations. And of course, they're there to make sure every detail runs smoothly from the start to the finish. Our small group size, just on average 11 people, strikes that perfect balance. You'll meet fellow curious travelers, but also dive deeper into the heart of a place without feeling like part of a crowd. Sustainability is at the core of everything we do. We only work with local partners who share our values, and we're committed to making a positive impact everywhere we go. Last but not least, we're proud to say that our travellers notice the difference. We've received FIFO's Platinum Trusted Service Award, with customer ratings consistently over 4.5 out of 5. Plus, we're also B Corp certified company, joining a global community of businesses that balance profit with purpose. Now, I'm absolutely thrilled today to be joined by three of our amazing product experts, Fathom, Anthony, and James. Not only are they going to be sharing some truly unforgettable experiences during their presentations, but also part of the team answering the questions behind the scenes throughout the event. And don't worry, we're going to bring them back for that live Q&A at the end, so you'll have a chance to see even more of them then. The Explore Foundation is how we give back that little extra to the destinations that we visit. The foundation is a registered charity run by a board of independent trustees, and when you travel on an Explore tour, we donate on your behalf. The money raised supports grassroots initiatives that empower people and create opportunities and support nature. So far, we've provided bikes to help women in rural Tanzania access education. We've helped keep elephants in their natural habitats in Thailand. And we've installed solar panels in India, allowing a weave-in cooperative to focus on running their business rather than worrying about keeping the lights on. Let me share with you an example of the wonderful projects we're able to support. In Tanzania, as populations expand, people are living in increasingly more rural areas, close to key wildlife corridors. This can cause issues as elephants are very tempted by the food grown by communities. Crops are like sweets to elephants, extremely tempting. So it is a real problem for people already suffering from food insecurity. And nature provides an ideal solution. Elephants are scared of bees. Yes, the biggest land animal is scared of one of the smallest. So wired fences with beehives are installed. If an elephant brushes against the wire, the bees buzz and the elephants instinctively move away. Not only does this keep the crops safe, but elephants can still move freely along the wildlife corridor. And there is an added bonus. These beehives create honey, which are harvested by the Women's Collective and sold to tourist lodges, a real win-win initiative. The Explore Foundation has so far funded 1 kilometre of fencing. So that's 50 beehives. The handy QR code that you can see on screen now will take you to the Foundation's website if you want to see a little bit more detail about the incredible projects and help us fundraise to double our impact and raise enough to install another kilometre. We've got 5 amazing journeys lined up for you today, each offering a window of a completely different culture. First, we're going to head over to Colombia, where lush rainforests set a stage for once-in-a-lifetime coffee and chocolate experiences. Then we're off to a foodie adventure to northern Spain, where rich culture meets pinchos and tapas. Then we're off to a brand new destination, Algeria, a new gem in the Mediterranean Sea. Then we're heading to India, where we'll rediscover some known places, but with an upgraded twist. And last but not least, we're going to Japan, and we're taking you away from that main island and as part of the country to see a true hidden gem. Each presenter will share their own stories, expert insights, and tips for getting the most out of these unforgettable destinations. Now, I'd like to welcome James, who will take you through to Colombia. Over to you, James.
Great, thank you, Harriet. Thanks everyone for joining us. It's my absolute pleasure to be here talking about some of the places I most love in the world, really. So if we move off this really colourful slide of typical architecture onto the map, a little bit about Colombia for me. So I've been lucky enough to have travelled across virtually every Latin American country, and this is one of my absolute favourites. Why? Because it's such there's so many positives about Colombia. I think the people, really, it's a tremendously welcoming, upbeat, fun, positive place to visit. It's super safe, especially in the places that are open for tourism, which is the places that we obviously visit. It's immense. The scenery is, I mean, it's a vast country. This is where South America joins the Isthmus and Central America. And if you had some contours on this map, you'd see that what happens when the Andes reach the top of South America, they split out into 3 chains: the eastern chain, the central chain, and the western chain. So we'll get to see a bit of that dramatic beauty in Bogota. We start the trip in the eastern chain, and then we travel from Armenia in the coffee region on a really beautiful journey to Medellin in the central range before flying up north to end the trip on a high on the Caribbean Sea in beautiful Cartagena. So you've got the incredible beauty and the contours that aren't on this map. Also, the biodiversity. Harriet mentioned lush rainforests. There's a tremendous biodiversity. In fact, it's only the second most biodiverse country on Earth, with Brazil being the first. So it's got so much to offer, and flora, fauna, culture, history, you name it, scenery. It is a really great destination. So moving into the details. So the coffee region, firstly, I'd say Bogota. I haven't got any slides here. That's just because there's so much to talk about in so little time. But Bogota is a great, interesting city. It's set at an altitude of 2,500 meters. It's got a wonderful old core. It's got a really important gold museum. You could easily add extra time because we just scratched the surface with one night in the capital on this 8-day upgraded trip. When we leave the capital, we fly across the Rio Magdalena from one range to the other to join the central range, and we head into what's called the Eje Cafetera. That is the coffee region of Colombia. I'd say that one of the places you should definitely visit for anyone going to Colombia. It's one of the most beautiful parts of the country, and you can get an idea. The photos do not do it justice. It's a range after range of mountains. These, what you're looking at on the right hand side, are the foothills effectively of a big national park that's topped and centered around a huge over 5,000 meter active volcano. So that rich soil, the topography, the climate, everything makes it perfect for growing coffee. So this is that's why it's called the coffee region. And when we visit, we will include a visit to a finca where you can learn about the gourmet coffee. So Brazil and Vietnam produce quantities of Robusta coffee, but Arabica coffee of of Colombia is finer. So what makes it a gourmet coffee, each parcel of land is quite small. The different terroir gives different haciendas different flavors. It's really refined and high quality coffee. So we learned a little bit about that. To give you an idea of the steepness of these mountains, when I visited one of the haciendas, a coffee plantation, the workers actually literally tied their waist. They tied a rope around their waist to a tree at the top of the hill, and as they went down and tended to the plants, that was to help them stay upright and not fall all the way down the hill. So they farm all of this beautiful land. And what else do you find here? A bit of that biodiversity. There's a #1 country in the world for birds. So there's 1,900 species of bird found. For me, the most special would have to be the hummingbird, only found in the Americas. A number of different hummingbird species are found in Colombia, and you will definitely get to see them at feeders. So it's an incredible bird, so iridescent and beautiful, and they can hover and stay completely stationary as they flap their wings so fast, and then they can dart off at like 100 miles an hour. Their heartbeat, you think how tiny these creatures are and how small its heart is. Its heart can reach up to 1,200 beats per minute. So you just think about how incredible nature is. And also some species of hummingbird can go into an effective hibernation and slow that heartbeat down to 50 beats per minute when it's a particularly cold part of the country. At the bottom left, an example of the 4,000 flowers. We visit a local family-run farm where they have a number of different beautiful endemic orchids. And it's on this farm, they'll no doubt have feeders where you'll be able to see these hummingbirds come in. They also have bonsai trees, and they'll talk a little bit to the flora and the fauna of this beautiful country. And also that family-run hacienda where we do that orchid tour will also host a typical lunch for us as we move on. So after our beautiful drive from the coffee region to Medellin, we reach a really vibrant city, the second biggest city in Colombia, 2.5 million people inhabit. It's moved on from the dark days of Pablo Escobar in the 90s and the 80s, where it was ruled over by the infamous drug lord, and it is now a vibrant, successful, welcoming, interesting, fascinating city called the Eternal Spring because it's set at 1,500 meters above sea level. A lot of the original Spanish settled colonial towns and cities are located at altitudes, and that was to avoid the disease vectors in the lower, the more tropical places where the mosquitoes were more prevalent. So that's why you get a lot of these historic towns at higher climes, and it really is a perfect climate. I've been there. And it's pretty much the same the year through. I was there over Christmas and it was an absolutely beautiful, perfect climate. An example of any Colombian Spanish city will have these really grand, hundreds of years old trees. So in that main picture, you're looking at the cathedral, some tropical, a variety of different beautiful tropical trees that come into flower at different times. And the more famous rather than infamous son of Medellin is Botero. He's a famous local and internationally famous sculptor and artist. And there's some example of his work in the main square. In those dark days, the shanty towns on the periphery of Medellin were particularly affected by Escobar. And what's happened in the past couple of decades is there's been a lot of tremendously good work been done to incorporate those people into the wider economy and into a normal life, in inverted commas, and to give people opportunities. And on the city tour, we'll not only see some history of Pablo Escobar and then things like Botero and the iconic landmarks of the city, but we'll also take the cable car up into one of these neighborhoods. So Comuna 13, this particular one's called, and you can see up close firsthand the effect and the positive effect of all this development work over the past couple of decades, and it just helps build a bit of a more rounded picture of the destination. So moving from by flight, again, there's two flights on this 8-day trip. We fly up to the Caribbean coast and we visit one of the finest examples of a Spanish colonial walled town in the whole of the Americas, and that is Cartagena. The full name is Cartagena de las Indias, and it is really well preserved, a perfectly preserved walled city. And we have a great location of our hotel throughout this trip. We're in upgraded hotels. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, but 4- and 5-star hotels. And when you go to Cartagena, you really want to be staying within the walls of the old town. And you can see some typical architecture on the left bottom hand corner. And you see in the main picture that the expansion of the city, the modern expansion of the city just next door to it. And it's all of that coastline is lined with beautiful beaches. So it's good to have a dip in the Caribbean as well as doing the sightseeing. So moving on, because of the topography over the hundreds of years until modern times and modern roads and plains, a lot of the cities that were established by the Spanish in the early days effectively grew up as islands. They couldn't communicate easily and readily between them. So you do get a very distinct culture as you go from different region and different city to city. And what you find in the northern coast is a lot more evidence of Afro-Caribbean culture, and that will be in the music, the food, and the people, because there were more plantations there, so there is a blacker population on the coast. But there's always life wherever you go in Colombia. They're full of a zest for life and a really positive outlook. And the music, I just touched on that, but the live music is one of many reasons to visit this beautiful country. So just wrapping up on our upgraded highlights of Colombia trip, 4- and 5-star hotels. So that's some example pictures here. There's a lobby on the top right corner in a really smart, nice neighborhood of Bogota that we stay in a nice 5-star hotel. Bottom right, probably one of the pics of the tour is the finca or hacienda stay in the countryside in the coffee region where you've got beautiful views and it's all built in local wood. And then top left is Medellin. We stay in a nice 4-star hotel, very centrally located. And then in Cartagena, the rooftop pool, bottom left. So Just to wrap up, in summary, you've got 7 nights in beautiful 5-star hotels with great locations, 8-day trip, and more information online. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour of our wonderful one of our trips to Colombia. Before I hand over to Fathom, who's going to whisk you off to India, of really big contrast.
Thanks, James. Hi, everyone. For those that don't know me, I'm Fathom, and I'm the very lucky product manager that gets to look after the larger than life country that is India. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a tour that was launched a couple of months ago, and it's the upgraded Highlights of Northern India tour. I wanted to develop a tour very much with first-time travellers to India in mind. And what better way of doing that than to build off the really famous Golden Triangle route? So for those that don't know what the Golden Triangle is, the Golden Triangle is a very well-trodden path that many first-time travellers to India tend to take. It starts normally in Delhi. It heads south to Agra, which is the home to the Taj Mahal, before heading over to Jaipur, which is the capital of Rajasthan, before returning back to Delhi. As you can see on the map, you can notice that we take a couple of deviations from the typical Golden Triangle route by heading down south to Dholpur, and also heading over to Shahpura as well. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the itinerary and also why we've incorporated these hidden gems into the itinerary. So next slide, please. So starting off, the entry point to many tours to India often start in Delhi, and Delhi's great because it's so very well connected with many parts of the world. It also offers a really good introduction to India for those who've never traveled to India before, as it's made up of 2 parts that are the perfect blend of new and old India. So on one hand, you have Old Delhi, which is very much kind of the Delhi that you envisage when you think of India. It's made up of kind of colourful, chaotic markets and bazaars, and lots of architecture that is reminiscent of the Mughal Empire. On the other hand, you have New Delhi, which you can see in the top right-hand corner, which is a product of the British Empire. Many of the streets are kind of wide, there's tree-lined boulevards, and some of the architecture, which is Georgian architecture, looks very reminiscent of some of the buildings that you might see in London. So for your first kind of introduction to Delhi and into India, I really wanted to incorporate a walking tour that has a little bit of a twist. So for that reason, I worked to partner up with the Salam Balak Trust. So they are a trust that works specifically with street children, providing them shelter and homes. They work most importantly with runaways around the New Delhi station. So they provide them an education, access to healthcare, which is really important. But what is quite interesting is that they offer them the opportunity to train as guides and to find their own independence through earning a living in the tourism industry. So in this first kind of introduction to India, you'll embark on a walking tour of Old Delhi with a guide that is essentially an alumni of the trust. So they'll talk to you about the Delhi that they know, tell you stories about their life living in the city. But what I like about it is that they'll take you to some of their favorite street food vendors, where you'll get a taste for some of the foods that are eaten by locals in India. One of which is the famous lassi, which you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, which is a yogurt drink that is drunk kind of across India, and it can be sweet or savoury, and it's also served in these lovely little terracotta pots that you throw away afterwards. So from Delhi, you'll head south to Agra, which, as I said, is the home to the Taj Mahal. I don't think I'm going to do it much justice kind of describing what it is, what it's like to see the Taj in person. It is an architectural marvel, and it is truly amazing to walk through the Great Gate at sunrise and see it in all its glory with its 4 minarets. So I definitely believe that you'll understand what I mean when you see it for yourself. But the couple of days that you spend in Agra is very much going to be focused around learning about the architecture, kind of seeing some of the precursors to the Taj, such as the baby Taj that you can see in the photo on the right, and of course, seeing one of the highlights at sunrise. From Agra, you take your first detour off the Golden Triangle to a stop that I'm really excited to talk to you about, and that's to the Chambal region. So I got to visit this region for the first time in March, and I'll be honest, I didn't really know much about it. So it quickly became one of the highlights of the tour I did because it was amazing for wildlife. Chambal is both a region and a river, and it provides a sanctuary for many of the endangered creatures that call this part of India home. And as you can see from the photos, they're a little bit unusual looking. So some of the wildlife that you should hope to spot on your boat safari when you're in Chambal include the gharials, which are in the bottom right-hand corner. They are a type of fish-eating crocodile with really, really long snouts. You might also see some marsh or mugger crocodiles. There's about 8 different species of turtle, including the soft shell turtle that you can see in the bottom left. And in the top left corner, it looks a little bit like the Amazonian river dolphin, but it's actually the endangered gangetic river dolphin that also kind of lives in the river too. There are also a lot of different bird life. So the twitchers on the tour that was with me were in heaven. There's lots of photographic opportunities to take photos of the birds there. I'm not going to try and describe what it's like to see or what kind of birds you see there. There's a lot of different birds. But the second type of safari that you do when you're in Chambal is a jeep safari of the rugged terrain around your hotel. So the Chambal ravines are famous because of the dacoits or the bandits that operated in this area up until the early 2000s. They were essentially outlaws and were an organized crime gang that used to steal from the rich to help the poor. So you learn a little bit about their colourful history, why they operated in the area, kind of why they came to be. And there's some interesting stories around some of the more famous dacoits, including one called the Queen of the Bandits, who later became a member of Indian Parliament, which is quite interesting. So from Chambal, you'll then continue on to Jaipur, which is the final stop on the Golden Triangle. It's a long transfer, it takes about 6 hours, but we've broken it up with a stop at the stepwell, the Chand Bowery stepwell, which is both the deepest and largest stepwell in the whole of India. It's famous for its geometric design that you can see in the photo. It's very, very well preserved. And you'll spend some time again learning a bit about how it was used, what water it provided to the locals before continuing on to the pink city that is Jaipur. Jaipur is probably one of my favorite stops on the Golden Triangle purely because it's so photogenic. It's also famous because of the handicrafts. It's got a lot of tailors and craftsmen that sell their wares in Jaipur. So you would spend time learning about the city palace, which you can see in the photo on the left-hand side with its beautiful frescoes. You'll also head up to Amber Palace with its Belgian glass rooms, as well as taking some time around the old city as well, kind of getting to know some of the tailors and hopefully buying some block print to take home. I've purposely built in some time in Jaipur to also take time to explore on your own, but also enjoy the heritage property that you'll be staying in the centre of the city. From Jaipur, you'll then take your final detour off the Golden Triangle to Shahpura. So Shahpura is a small village. It's a few hours from Jaipur, but I wanted to make sure there's some time to kind of decompress and see a little bit more local life outside of the busyness that is kind of Agra, Delhi and Jaipur. We picked this really beautiful heritage property that's a 300-year-old property that used to be the home to a noble family. But as you can see, it's now a converted hotel. It's a 5-star property with a really lovely swimming pool. So a night has been spent here to kind of enjoy reflect on the trip, have a farewell meal with your group before you return to the busyness that is Delhi. Next slide, please. So that in a nutshell is the highlights of Northern India. It's a 10-day trip, 7 nights spent in premium accommodation and then 2 nights in a comfortable hotel, which will be in the Chambal region. It combines really well with our Ranthambore extension. So for those that have it at the top of their list to see the Bengal tigers, if you wanted to add on the Ranthambore extension either before or after, it brings the total trip up to 14 days. And it's a really nice getaway to go on kind of during the winter months, as it's perfect to go to this part of India anytime between January and April or October to December. That's it for me, and I'm going to head you back to James.
That's amazing. Thank you, Fathom. That is so exotic and some beautiful slides. So it feels a little bit less exotic, but this is a part of the world that's very close to my heart. I absolutely love Spain, probably my most favorite country. Lived there for many years, and this is a really cool route through some of the diverse provinces of northern Spain. So if you ask a Spaniard, they'd agree that Spain is really Spain's, in that it's made up of a number of different autonomous regions, each of which has a distinct culture, and in some cases a different language even, and cuisine. While there are some things that are common across the whole of the country, there are definitely specialties that you will get to try on this wonderful route. So if you were to say which part of food of a foodie country is the most foodie, I would definitely have to say the Basque country, which is where this trip starts. And then this route is a brilliant road trip to leading down the Ebro Valley to Catalonia, ending up on the Mediterranean Sea in Barcelona. One thing that you can't see here, so talking about contours again, Switzerland is the most mountainous country in Europe, and Spain is the second most mountainous country. So it's not just the Pyrenees that separates France from Spain, it is covered in different mountain ranges, and you'll see the Cantabrian range in the north as we make our way from Bilbao across to La Rioja, and then you'll see beautiful scenery as you make your way to Pamplona and then down through the Ebro Valley, Zaragoza, leading to the Mediterranean coast. So moving on, so we start the trip with 2 nights in a lovely 4-star hotel in Bilbao. Because the second day is really dedicated to sort of seeing a couple of places across the northern coast and San Sebastian, which we'll come on to, there's more to see, not just the Guggenheim. There's plenty to see in Bilbao. So once again, you could comfortably add a night or two at the beginning of your trip to get to see more. And this is the most famous building in the whole of really in Spain in many ways, but certainly Bilbao. It's designed by Frank Gehry, built in the 1990s, and it is the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, which you should definitely see, not least from the outside. You don't need to necessarily go in, but it's just incredible to look at from different angles and at different times of the day. And that's just a few hundred meters down from that hotel. So it's perfectly, whatever time you get in, whatever time of day, you can go down and have a look. So we dedicate the second day of this trip to there's 3 Basque regions in Spain. So Bilbao is the capital of one of them, and San Sebastian is the capital of another. It's one of my absolute favorite cities. It's definitely, I'd say, the most foodie. It's got some of the best food and drink in the whole country, and it's really just so beautiful. You can see there the Concha Bay and the island in the bay, the protected waters, perfect for bathing. And at the headland, you can see just ahead of the island in the middle of the picture is the old town. You can't see the detail, obviously, from this distance, but it's all hewn from a beautiful honeycomb coloured sandstone. And it's just got lovely, beautiful plazas and side streets, and it's largely pedestrianised, and it's just a pleasure to wander around. and the Basques do grazing and eating out like no one else. So tapas in Spain is a sort of bar food that accompanies drink and quite often is before a main meal. It could form your main meal. And in the Basque country, they're called pinchos. So you definitely should try some pinchos when you're in San Sebastian. And you could see in the top left picture there, it's made up all of the little streets that run all the way through the town, not just the old town, are made up of lots of little bars and restaurants that specialize in different types of tapas. So the locals will quite often bar hop from place to place and choose the place quite often based on what food it serves, and they will get the variety that way. But a wonderful day trip to San Sebastian starts this trip. Before we start our journey, what you're looking at in the main picture there, the mountain range in the distance frames the Ebro Valley, and all the patchwork of fields that you can see are actually grapes. So they're vineyards, and that's the Rioja region. So it produces really high quality wines. La Guardia, it's a little bit controversial locally. So the Rioja region, it doesn't fall directly in the Rioja region. It's called the Rioja Alavesa. It's a local political thing. So the Basques have basically nabbed a corner of the Rioja region for their own because it's such a big name, Rioja, associated with wine. The important thing as far as we're concerned is it's beautiful and the wine is just as good. It really is irrelevant. So this is in the Rioja Alta, and this beautiful medieval town is called La Guardia, and we spend lunchtime and a couple of hours to wander the streets of La Guardia, where you can take pictures of the views overlooking Rioja before we head off to the Marques de Cáceres vineyard, where we include some wine tasting. It's a busy day before we head on to Pamplona. We also include a short stretch of the Camino de Santiago, so St. James's Pilgrimage Way, the French route that eventually leads to Santiago. We walk a few kilometers of that stretch, and you can see a medieval bridge that we see on that route. So top right is just coming back to the Basques. The Basques, you can read a lot. There's books out there about them, and it's a fascinating people, thought to be one predating the Romans, a really ancient people. And there's a bit of a mystery about where they might have originated from, somewhere in Central or Asia or North India originally. Their language group is like no other. Of the 5 main language groups in Europe, they've got a different blood type, they've got a different cranial shape. They're a very proud and independent people, and they've been explorers and pioneers for many centuries. They were fishing off the coasts of North America hundreds of years before Columbus discovered the Americas, and they kept it a secret. A lot of the New World crops like tomato that were brought back from the Americas, it was the Basques that actually planted them in the land and experimented with the flavors and the new crops that were coming in from the New World. So it's not just a modern thing, this pioneering aspect to their culture. They've always been that way. So we finish off at the beginning of this trip in Pamplona. So the bottom right picture is the main square. We've included a guided tour of the central market with a local guide who will talk to the different things that you'll see in the market, the different local specialties, and we've included a lunch there as well. So it's not just red wine with the Rioja. There's also lots of different types. It's not just Rioja. There's lots of different wonderful wine regions you'll be traveling close to or through. And when you're on the coast, actually, a Chacolí is a particularly distinct Basque white crisp wine, slightly effervescent, about 11%, perfect with seafood. And you'll get to try that if you want more in Bilbao and San Sebastian. So we're in Pamplona before we leave the Basque region. So that flag obviously was the Basque, representing the Basque nation. And then we make our way further down the Ebro Valley towards Catalonia. On the right-hand side, before we meet Montserrat on the left, we go to a town called Agramunt that's still got 2 factories that produce chocolate in the same way today than they did when they started the factories in the 1770s. So you get to learn about the local production of chocolate. Chocolata actually is an Aztec word. It was discovered by the conquistadores, and they brought back the cacao beans from Central America. And again, this part of the world was instrumental in sort of refining it and turning it into different things. So the maybe best served, you can take your pick. You can have a bar of chocolate or try it with Spanish donuts or churros, which is what you can see in the photo. On the left-hand side is the Benedictine monastery of Montserrat that is relatively close to Barcelona in the heart of Catalonia. And it's so dramatic. You see there the very unique geology that makes up the mountains, the big mountains that are home to Montserrat. Lots of people visit Montserrat as a day trip from Barcelona. And it's nice to spend the night there, because in the early morning and late afternoon, all those day trippers go back to Barcelona or wherever they came from, and you get it to yourself. And we ride up in a rack and pinion train to reach the complex where the monastery is, and our hotel, which is a historic building in itself. And then there's various trails as well. If you're a hiker, you can do a bit of walking. You can also catch a rack and pinion train further north as well. So moving on to the last part of this journey, which is Barcelona, one of the greatest cities in the whole of Spain. It's got a mix of everything. It's got Gothic, there's the ancient, there's the medieval, and there's also the modernist side to it. So what you're looking at there is some of the work of Gaudí, and he's an exponent of the Art Nouveau, the modernist architecture that you see that's incredible, that's scattered across Barcelona. The Sagrada Familia and the Park Güell is what you're looking at there. And then moving on, this is also in Barcelona. This is in the Gothic Quarter, so you can get lost in all these little alleyways where there's cool little bars and shops and restaurants. And the photo is also an experience that we've included. While paella is a traditional dish from Valencia, the Ebro Valley, where it reaches the Mediterranean in the Delta, has been a producer of paella rices for hundreds and hundreds of years. So they were originally introduced by the Moors, and then the cultivation of rice spread all over Spain over the past 1,000 years. And there's a really nice place that we visit in Barcelona that cooks a fantastic paella. So you can try this, famous in Valencia, but also across the whole of Spain. And you can get to try some of that delicious seafood paella. So a mixture of cities, towns, countryside, and food and drink experiences, 4 nights in premium hotel. And you can see there it's pretty visitable throughout the year, really. So we're going to move now to Anthony in North Africa.
Fantastic. Thank you, James, for that tantalizing overview of our new foodie trip in Spain. I always love listening to James talk about food. He always talks about it so passionately. Anyway, good afternoon or good evening, everyone. And let's take a short hop across the Mediterranean now to Algeria. And look, super excited to be talking to you about this. It's been 12 years since we last ran a tour series in Algeria, and we're really pleased to be back. First departure going on the 31st of January next year, and it's one of our best-selling new trips. In fact, it is our best-selling new trip this year, and I've seen for the comments we've got a couple of people that will be joining us later in the year as well. So hopefully give you a bit of a preview of what is to come. So let's have a look at the route on this trip. Algeria is vast. It's the largest country in Africa, and in fact, it's the 10th largest country in the world, 10 times the size of the UK. And we can broadly divide the country into 3 zones. So north of the country, the coastal region, very green, very fertile, pretty much most of the population will live in this area. Then we've got a band of the Saharan Atlas that comes across from Morocco. the more mountainous region, and then we're into the vast Sahara Desert with its enormous sand dunes and its great high rock plateaus, and that occupies about 2/3 of the country. So geographically, very diverse. Culturally, also very diverse as well, and a very rich history. So we've got the Phoenicians that occupied the coastal areas, 1,000 years before Christ, and they lived in the coastal plains. Then we had the Romans. Then they had the Arabs came across from Saudi Arabia. We had the Spanish influence in the 16th century, followed by the Ottomans, and then the French and the colonial rulers from 1830 to 1962. So it's got a very diverse cultural mix. But it's a young country as well, and lots of different languages spoken. So it's a fascinating place from a cultural perspective, and we'll get to see a lot of that in the trip. So let's go on to the next slide and look at the starting point, which is the city of Algiers. So Algiers is Algeria's modern capital. It was historically viewed as a jewel in the French Empire, and with good reason. It's a very cosmopolitan city. It's got lots of restaurants, and it's got some fantastic museums as well. It's got great street art. People are, often a bit surprised about how, vibrant the city is, and it's blessed with a beautiful Mediterranean climate. Not too hot in the summer, with a nice cooling sea breeze, but that Mediterranean climate keeps it a bit milder in the winter months as well. I think for me, the highlight is its Casbah. It's a UNESCO designated site built by the Ottomans. And for those of you who've been to fairs, it's sort of reminiscent of the hustle and bustle that you get there. Lots of narrow alleyways with the sights and the sounds and the food and the sellers. It's a cacophony of noise and energy, and it's a wonderful place to explore. And being a lot of investment going to restoring it now as well, which is great to see. The other picture, the other site I'd just point out, the bottom left there, that's the Martyrs Memorial, built to commemorate 20 years of independence. And you can actually get to the top of that. We'll do that as part of our Algiers city tour. Fantastic views of the cityscape from there. So moving on to the next slide, and what a contrast this is. So from Algiers, we actually fly south into that sort of Sahara Atlas, just bordering on the Sahara Desert, to Agadir, which is in the heart of the Mazab Valley. So the town itself is a complete contrast to the north. It's a deep valley with a palmery running through it. And we spent a couple of days here. In amongst the Mozabite, which is a very proud Berber community, and it's basically centered around 5 hilltop towns. As I say, complete contrast to the north. Very conservative culture, but very welcoming as well. And we have a home cooked lunch on the first day there and explore the fortified towns. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to drive steadily back to the north, and that will be a journey that takes us 7 days to do that. So we headed to Masila, and we're stopping at some of the great archaeological sites. So on the left-hand side here, you've got Timgrad, and this is a site where its scale is just so impressive. Now, this was built as a retirement center for Roman generals, built right on the edge of the Roman Empire, no doubt to keep them out of trouble. And the wonderful thing about this site is just how few people you'll see here. If you contrast that some of the big sites in Europe and other places, very, you almost have the place to yourself. So, wonderful to experience that. And I say the scale is fantastic. We've also got the royal tomb of Magdeshan, which is on the top left, top right-hand corner. And at the bottom right is Tepiza, which was founded by the Carthaginians. It's a port and a trading center, amazingly well preserved. In fact, a fantastic setting there of this archaeological site right on the ocean between the mountains and the Mediterranean. Another of the great classic sites we'll see is Jamila, which is another Roman site, sits on a spur between two of the great rivers. And just project yourself there for a second and imagine that you're sitting in there, this vast amphitheatre that's got a capacity of 3,000 people. You can just imagine what that would have been like in Roman times to have been there at that point. So another of the great archaeological sites. So moving on, I'd mentioned the cities, and another of the great cities is Constantine that we will visit. We'll spend a couple of days here. It's the third biggest city of Algeria, known as the City of Bridges. Not for the faint-hearted, particularly if you suffer from vertigo, but it's a very old city, and it's formed around these deep gorges and these network of bridges that criss and cross. So this was a great Roman town, and that they had their power base here. The Ottomans also had considerable influence, but nowadays it's very cosmopolitan. There's fantastic restaurants, and there's some amazing architecture is here. So we've got a couple of days in Constantine as well. And then, having explored the north, we almost go to a completely different country. We head to the south. So that's 1,000 miles south of Algiers. And the next part of the trip is deep in the desert. So if we just go on to the next slide. So we've got 6 nights wild camping in the deep Sahara. And this really is a magical travel experience. Now, it's not for everyone. Just full disclosure, there's no electricity, there's no running water, there's 4 days without showers. There's no mobile phone reception, which for some people might be terrified at that prospect. Personally, I think that's rather appealing to have a little digital detox. But you need a sense of adventure when you're doing this. Jeanette is the jumping off point. It's a market town built around an oasis. And we basically spend the next 7 days traveling in and out of the Sahara in 4x4s, accompanied by a wonderful camp crew, the Tuareg people, a wonderfully proud community that live in the far south. So if we have a look at the next slide, what do we, lots of stops along the way, but it's known for its wonderful rock art. There's over 15,000 depictions. It's been described as a world's biggest outdoor museum. And the desert scenery is absolutely spectacular. And so we'll go on each day in our 4x4, a fleet of up to 3 vehicles, wild camping. Tents get set up every night, and we have a cook and we have a camp crew that sets everything up. All the meals are included. So our wonderful camp crew will prepare delicious meals, whether that's couscous or roasted vegetables or lamb cutlets. They'll produce some wonderful meals, all accompanied by mint tea, and we'll enjoy their hospitality as we do an adventure around the desert. So just wrapping up on this particular tour, if we can just have a look at the last slides. It's a 16-day trip. It does operate, so just a couple of points. So the desert isn't for everybody because it is quite basic. So you can either book the north of the country, or you can book the desert, or you can do the combination trip, which is what I've just presented to you just now as a 16-day trip. The combination trip is offered in February and April and October to November, so quite a narrow season there. Obviously too hot in the summer and too cold in the winter, and we avoid Ramadan. But if you're looking to travel to the north, then that is much more of a year-round destination. So I hope that's given you a little bit of a taster, and I'm going to pass you back to James, who is going to present our final trip of today.
Thanks, Anthony. So we're going from North Africa to the land of the rising sun now. So we're going to bring it home with one of our brand new trips in Japan, which I will talk about. Let's move on to the map, and then I can give a bit more context. That if you look at the top left corner, the inset map, Japan's made up of hundreds of islands, if not thousands, but the main islands of the main group are 4, and they are Hokkaido in the north, Honshu, which is where you find Kyoto and Tokyo in the middle, and then as you go further west and south, as you can see there, Kyushu is the 3rd largest island, and it is located a little bit closer to China and South Korea in in the south of the island group. And what this 9-day trip does is it steps a little bit away from the sort of classic tourist route that is Kyoto and Tokyo, which are brilliant in their own right. But if you wanted to see something that was a little bit less touristed, a little bit maybe more authentic, less visited, this trip, around 9-day trip around Kyushu Islands, brilliant for a second visit to Japan or a first visit if you just wanted to go somewhere that isn't your typical place. But it's full of highlights, and I'll talk through those now as I run through the trip. But basically, again, with the scenery, this is volcanic now. So Japan is a dramatically beautiful country. I think it's one of the lowest percentages. I think it's something like 20% of the country is flat and arable, suitable for arable, for farming. So it gives you an idea of how steep and forested and mountainous the country is. And when you get down to Kyushu, it's particularly volcanic. So we make our way across the northern part of the island, flying in and out of Fukuoka, and we make our way partly by bullet train, and partly there's 2 days in a charter bus where we tackle the central part of the north of Kyushu, going through Aso Kuju National Park. So it's a dramatically beautiful and varied scenery that we encounter on that journey through the centre, leading us up to Beppu before we come back round to Fukuoka by train. So there's some very long and unpronounceable names in there. Another thing to point out about Kyushu is it's historically always been one of those places that was a gateway to the West. So Japanese culture is endlessly fascinating. It's a very unique country, and part of the reason for that is that it was isolated from the world for great long periods. And then there were periods where they had interaction and trade with the West and the rest of Asia. And in those periods, a lot of those places were focused on Kyushu. So moving on to the first slide, we're dropping into Fukuoka here. This is a typical night scene. The locals, so it's a bit of a foodie destination within a foodie country that is Japan, and particularly Fukuoka is known for its food. So a lot of Japanese might just go for a weekend trip to Fukuoka to go out and gorge themselves on the local cuisine. One dish that's gone international is tonkotsu ramen in the bottom right corner, and that is your pork bone broth ramen soup, noodle soup, which is delicious. And there's a number of other local specialties which are awesome. And what do the locals do at night if they're not eating at home? They'll go out, meet up with friends, and go to yatai. So these are small pop-up outdoor food stalls that I'm sure your tour leader will take you to on one of the evenings when we're in Fukuoka to see the local cuisine and the local scenes. So moving on from Fukuoka, we go to Nagasaki, an important city today, and it was in the 1940s. And it's a natural harbour, and it was a really important industrial city, which is one of the reasons that led the Americans to target it. And unfortunately, the Second World War, there was the second atom bomb dropped on Nagasaki, but today you wouldn't even notice. It's all been rebuilt, a bit like Hiroshima. It's actually a really vibrant, lively, and interesting and rewarding place to visit. We do pay homage to the people who perished, and we learn about the atomic bomb in a visit to a museum and a memorial park, as well as seeing some of the highlights of this remarkable city. So one of the aspects of Nagasaki is that during the Edo period, bear with me, I'm not going to go too in depth, but in the Edo period from roughly the late 1600s to the late 1800s, Japan had got fed up with foreigners and they closed the door. And the only place, the sole gateway to the West during that 200-year period, was this man-made island in the harbour of Nagasaki that is called Dejima Island. And it was the Dutch had the contract, if you like. They were the people who occupied Dejima, and they were the gateway from the West into Japan during that period. So this has been, the whole of the city's been rebuilt, including the old colonial houses from that period of history, which adds a bit of interest to the day trip around Nagasaki. We're jumping across now, not enough time to talk about everything, but when we go through Aso Kuju National Park, we encounter a variety of scenery. So there's vast grasslands, there's caldera, there's steaming fumaroles, and then there's pockets of lush forest. And this is a shrine that's located beautifully in the forest that we visit on one of those days. And more scenery that you can't get an idea of the scale really, but this is the second largest active caldera on Earth. So it's a great big volcanic crater, and there's volcanoes within volcanoes really, and it's just a dramatic rolling landscape that's perfect for a road trip. And one of the experiences that we include in the bottom right there, which is overlooking the Tadarara wetlands, is a typical taiko drum performance with a absolutely fantastic backdrop. So that is a really special experience we've woven into the itinerary. And also, to mix it up from staying in hotels and towns, we spend one night in a more rural location. The whole of Japan has a number of onsen towns, which are hot spring towns across the country. And because it's so volcanic, there's a number on Kyushu Island. And this is probably one of the most beautiful in the whole of Japan. It's called Kurakoa Onsen. It's a little bit of a secret. The Japanese certainly stay here. It's got lots of ryokan properties. So they are traditional Japanese accommodation where you've got sliding paper doors. You sleep on a futon on the grass straw mat on the floor. There's shared bathing. And so it's very, very Japanese. So we get a little slice of Japan really on this overnight stay in Kurakoa Onsen, which is a really special experience before pushing on to Beppu on the east coast. A little bit like a Blackpool of Japan, but it's endlessly fascinating. So there's a bit of a 70s faded feel to Beppu, but it's very much still a tourist destination. The top left, you can see that crazy photo there with all the fumaroles and vents and geysers. It's the second most, I think, after Yosemite, volcanic place on Earth. And it's also got lots of hot springs on the top right hand. You can see one of the particularly vibrant color from the mineral in the water, a deep red pool. We go to a number of these vibrant colored pools and we learn about Beppu. And we've included again a local guide who will take us through the local market, and we buy our lunch effectively and then cook it in a very local style, which they call hell steaming, which is over one of these volcanic vents. So you've got all the steam cooking your lunch, a very local lunch, and then we come back to Fukuoka via a samurai town, and that's the photo on the bottom left. That's Kitsuki Castle Town, which is really not visited much at all by tourism. So that's the 9-day loop through the beautiful island of Kyushu, pretty much year round. I would say if you're going to pay the money to go all the way over to Japan and you want to combine a trip. So we've got an absolute highlights trip, which is 14 days on the main island, simply Japan. You can see in the box there that the departure dates of this tour work perfectly, that you can combine both of these trips into one incredible 3-weeker, which would be amazing. So that brings us to the end. Towards the end, I just wanted to talk about a couple of new trips, 4 new trips, in fact, that have been launched in the last month. We've got an amazing, beautiful, moderate grade walking trip down in Bali and Lombok, on the islands of Bali and Lombok, which sounds and looks incredible. The Amalfi Coast is perfect for walking. We've also got a family adventure there, and now we've got a cultural trip that bases itself along the Amalfi Coast, and that is amazing. You've got Pompeii and the just beautiful scenery. There's Amalfi. And then we've got a Borneo Sabah wildlife highlights trip where you've got a good chance to see the orangutans and the proboscis monkey and other incredible wildlife on the island of Borneo. And then finally, last but not least, an upgraded best of South Africa with traditional game drives and some beautiful properties in that upgraded trip. So running slightly over, apologies for that. But now I think Harriet is going to come back in on cue. To introduce thank you, Harriet. to introduce the
Wow, thank you so much, James, Fathom, and Anthony. It was wonderful learning about the coffee regions in Colombia, the soft shell turtles in India, and the deep Sahara in Algeria. So have we got you feeling inspired yet? And are you ready to start planning your next adventure? Well, we'd love to help you with that, whether it's chatting to our friendly team or connecting to a trusted travel agent. We're here to answer your questions and get you that one step closer to your next unforgettable trip. We've had a great flow of questions coming in throughout the presentation. Thank you for those. And our team have been hard at work answering them. Now, we've saved a few of the most common questions to answer live. And after that, we'll be picking one lucky person at random to win an exciting prize draw. I'd like to invite Fathom, James, and Anthony to answer just some of the questions we've been asking. If you'd all like to join me back. Fantastic, guys. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for your presentations. They were wonderful. And even I have learned a lot from them. So first of all, Anthony, I've got a question for you. Any plans to develop a trip to Mozambique?
Yeah, thank you, Harriet. Well, I've just had to switch seats, as you can see. I'm not Sean. Yeah, so really good question here, and interesting. Actually, quite a few. I've had about 4 or 5 requests come through, exactly the same request. No imminent plans, but we used to offer Mozambique as part of our trips to the Kruger region. We stopped going there because of the border formalities were fairly painful, and it was taking groups ages to get across the border. But thank you for raising it. I am going to look at it again. Would love to reinstate that one.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anthony. James, I've got a question for you now. Do you do longer or any back-to-back trips in South America?
Yeah, I mean, you've got, first thing I'd point out is if you book a back-to-back trip, this is a relatively recent thing from Explorers, you get a 5% discount on both of those trips, as well as I believe that's combinable with any loyalty discount as well. So that's a good incentive. And if you paid the flights to go all the way to Colombia, then it does make a lot of sense to do a short hop to one of the neighboring countries. So the Avianca is the national airline, and it's actually a really good airline that has a very good wide network of flights. So if you look at Bogota too, you could easily combine it with a trip to Peru, a trip to the Galapagos, to Ecuador. You could hop up to Costa Rica, it's not very far away at all. Guatemala, really, there's so many countries. I wouldn't necessarily choose one that's exactly neighboring, although Ecuador is, but Panama, yeah, less so, but more the other countries that I mentioned. So that's covered
Brilliant.
it.
Thank you so much. No, that sounds amazing. Loads of different options for us to do. And then I've got a question for all of you to each answer. So Fathom, I'll come to you for your answer first. But how do you decide when to use internal flights?
Good question. We try not to use internal flights because sustainability is a very big focus here at Explore, but where we are short on time, or if it makes sense logistically to use internal flights, then we would weigh it up. But again, we try and look for other alternatives. So in India, for example, overnight trains are wonderful. It does kind of bring you closer to local life. It's that authentic experience. So where possible, we try and look at train options, just so you have that local interaction. But on the occasion where we're short on time, an internal flight is something that we would consider.
Brilliant, thank you. Anthony, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I mean, it very much depends on the size of the country as well and the infrastructure. So we've talked about Algeria. There's 2 domestic flights on that. They're not really avoidable, unfortunately. 1,000 miles driving would probably take you a few days. So yeah, but we do try and avoid them where possible.
Not sure what you mean. It sounds like it'd take a few hours, 1,000 miles. Right, and then James, what about your thoughts on this?
Yeah, we measure the carbon footprint of all of our trips, and in that calculation, when we're planning, that is part of the planning, to weigh up. In some cases, it could be 2 days to make the journey that you would make by a flight. So we've got one trip in Japan, for example, in winter that goes up to Hokkaido for the Sapporo Snow Festival. And we fly from Tokyo up to the island of Hokkaido. And we do that because the journey would require a night in a hotel and 2 days of journeying, which if you crunch out the maths of the carbon, it's actually less carbon impact to fly. So we do make the decisions based on calculations there. And ultimately, we try and avoid flying unless it makes a lot of sense with the flow of the itinerary.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for the three of you for joining us again to answer those questions. The team are still busily answering questions for the Q&A in the background. So if you've not got to your question, then we will. And we'll be sharing some frequently asked questions and answers in the event recording when the email goes out. Now, finally, we have got another exciting event coming up very soon. So don't forget to sign up for our digital event in West Africa. Join Anthony, again from this evening's digital event, to take us on an incredible journey covering some hidden gems like Togo, Benin, the Ivory Coast, and Gambia. The event is on Tuesday, the 11th of November, same time as this one. So sign up now, and we'll be really excited to see you there. Thank you so much for joining us today and getting involved in the Q&A and the chat. It's been a real pleasure to see the conversations and explore these tours with you all. Keep an eye on your inbox over the next few days for an email with the event recording and a quick feedback survey. We always love to hear your thoughts. I hope you've enjoyed the journey, and until next time, goodbye and happy travels.
Bye.